Do you remember when we spoke about boring stuff like child poverty and the National Health Service and the housing crisis and older people shivering to death in their homes rather than customs unions and the single market? Those were the days. I have to say, if I was those bankers and poverty-paying bosses and multinationals, the people who are always in power, whoever's in office, I'd be thrilled that Brexit's dominating. It's almost treated as something which has landed out of a clear blue sky one day. At a time of massive turmoil for so many people, you basically call a referendum, which many people interpret as, do you support the status quo, yes or no? And lots of people, they look at their lives, they think of all the times they lie in bed at night thinking of those unopened energy bills they're too scared to open. And then they get this ballot paper saying, are you happy? And of course, so many of them voted no. And many of those so-called centrists who promote Remain and say they're big Remainers have supported and indeed implemented and voted for the very policies which have led this country to the precipice that it currently stands upon. Think about the bedroom tax, disabled people, benefits stripped away from them, tax cuts for the rich, slashing of per pupil funding in education. All of those policies backed, voted for, implemented by Lib Dem MPs and Lib Dem ministers. In what sense are those people the architects of so much misery and turmoil and crisis, the answer to the very turmoil they themselves have created? I think nuance is important at the Brexit debate, although it's been systematically bludgeoned to death. Because of the bungling of the Conservative Party, increasing numbers of Leavers think that the only genuine Brexit is a no-deal Brexit. And on the Remain side, more and more have come to a very determined view that Brexit just needs to be stopped altogether. The middle ground on Brexit has just shrunk and shrunk. We shouldn't be defined by how we voted 3 years ago in a referendum on our relationship with the European Union. That you just say, here's a load of Remainers and here's a load of Leavers, and that's actually what unites them, is a complete nonsense. We do need to start emphasising what unites the majority of society against the interests of the elite, who keep plunging this country into disaster, walk off, and then let other people get the blame for all the injustices they've caused. So let's think of the Brexit Party, Nigel Farage, bold, anti-establishment public school boy from Dulwich, who used to work in the city, bankrolled by multi-millionaires, supporting policies like privatising the NHS, slashing taxes on the rich. Don't be angry with these rich elites, be angry with migrants. And of course they're not really responsible. It's the very people in the City of London who are their friends and former colleagues, of course, of Nigel Farage himself. A no-deal Brexit is in no sense taking back control. What it will mean in practice is a big economic shock which will be absorbed not by the elites, by those who are already struggling in British society. And the other danger is, what it would mean is turn us into a vassal state of Donald Trump's United States of America. Because all a trade deal with Donald Trump's America means is prizing open our National Health Service, our proudest institution, to US multinational corporations. Is that what people voted for in the referendum? I don't think so. We now have this perverse spectacle, don't we, where a tiny rump of the Tory membership, who are completely unrepresentative of British society, are on course to elect Britain's own Donald Trump, Boris Johnson. That isn't taking back control. Politicians and the media are pitting people against each other on the issue of Brexit, an attempt to inject a level of vitriol and anger which has completely poisoned public debate and deflected away from the issues that should matter. When you have enemies of the people and saboteurs, I think this is a deliberate strategy to erase any sort of nuance in the Brexit debate, to intentionally polarise it, to make it impossible to have any form of compromise. Ironically, a lot of those who style themselves as moderates and so-called centrists, they see it as treachery, attacking the attempt by a leadership they called extreme to create a compromise. The irony is, if it wasn't so serious and so tedious, it would be quite amusing. The problem that Labour and Jeremy Corbyn has faced is that Brexit has robbed them of a sense of insurgency. When you're explaining, you're losing. Because, you know, if you want to stop Brexit, you just say, oh, stop Brexit, that's my position. If you want a no-deal Brexit, easy, bam, one sentence. But Labour's position is to have to explain, well, so we want a permanent customs union, and we want to guarantee these rights for workers, consumers, environmental protection. I mean, already people switch off. It's sad that, because that, I think, is a compromise which was a commendable and honourable way to try and bridge a bitter divide in British society, which has polarised this nation like never before. And this culture war at some point has to come to an end. If there is another referendum, what it has to do is it has to not treat Leave voters as though they're thick and stupid and bigots. A lot of the sense they had, that resentment and anger they felt, which caused them to vote to Leave, unless there's an understanding and an empathy about that, then why would there be a different result? For those who really passionately want another referendum. And it has to be combined with a bold, compelling, inspiring economic vision which focuses on the very communities that have been neglected and abandoned and run down by a political and economic elite which keeps plunging this country into crisis. It would do this debate a lot of good if, instead of a self-righteousness that some have about their position, treating it as some great antidote, to realise that there are downsides to every position on Brexit. If we're going to move on as a country, I think we need, on Brexit, a lot more nuance than we currently have. Please donate whatever you can to DDM Patreon. It's so important that we support this sort of journalism. We know we have a corporate-dominated media. It's important for our democracy, if nothing else. So many others obviously go to advertisers and that can compromise their editorial independence. They don't do it. Please back them. Please give them whatever you can and support them because they're great.